Hey, Dave Molenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I have a question today that is going to require some thought for you. So think about the people that are in your life and think about, are there people in your life that add value? Because I am going to talk to you and introduce to you a guy that's going to definitely add some value today for you. And I know we're always looking to add value to other people, so we're going to learn about that. So I'm honored to be hanging out with this guy. I'm going to struggle with his name. His first name's easy, Tom. I tried to get him to be Tom Jones, but he wouldn't. It's Tom Kereszti. Kereszti.
Perfect.
How do you say it? It's better off if you say it.
Kereszti.
Kereszti. Gosh, it looks like I shouldn't even, there's a Z in there. So Tom, how are you today?
Living the dream in Southern California.
Awesome. Super excited, fellow author. And you are working under the Leadership Disciples name. Tell me, what is the Leadership Disciples company?
We help companies or senior executives become better leaders through a number of different ways. We sit down with them and see what is their challenges, what are their roadblocks, and try to help them work through it.
Awesome. So do a quick question right out of the gate. Does every leader know what they're struggling with, or do you see that you're helping them uncover some of the things that they don't even know they're dealing with? Or do most people have a really solid understanding of what it is that they're struggling with?
Well, a lot of people who are in leadership positions, they believe they know everything. So a typical request would come to me and say, hey, Tom, I want you to help me with X, and hopefully you can get that done in the next month for a price. And then you really start the process, and it unravels very quickly, where they realize what their challenges are is not really X. It may be X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
And it's not going to get done in a month. Maybe it gets done a little bit longer because leadership issues tend to be really simple or really complex. It could be simple in the sense that a leader occupies an office,
okay,
and who's not a true leader. So maybe before him, who occupied that office was a true leader and built a great establishment, and he just kind of walked in there and he's not really a leader. So the quick solution is for the organization to get rid of him, so that's a pretty quick solution. Or it's a lot more complex, where the organization needs a little bit of massaging.
Well, and that's the thing I think is so unique, is that you need all this schooling to be an attorney. You need all this schooling to be a doctor. You need all this schooling to, be a mechanic. You need no training at all to be a leader. You can just basically you call yourself a leader and you're in, right? I mean, there's leadership training everywhere, but there's nothing that's like, hey, you should do this, this, and this, and then you can get you can be considered a leader. So do you think that there's leaders out there that, are flying by the seat of their pants, that really have no clue what they're doing? Or do you see most people have a method to their madness, I guess?
Well, I guess everybody thinks they have a method to their madness, but look, there is training out there to be a better leader. Sure. And it's really, I was fortunate to be in an organization early in my career that stuck me in a Stephen Covey course, right? So I was, Coveyized back in the 80s. Then I had my first personality assessment was Myers and Briggs, and then I had LSI. So there was a lot of investment in me from people that I worked with that recognized that leadership doesn't happen, and we have a tendency to promote people into leadership positions because they are good at a skill, like you mentioned before.
Sure.
I'm a good accountant, so I become head of the accounting department. I'm a good engineer, so I become head of the engineering department. And the higher you go up in an organization, the less that particular skill set helps you, and the
Sure.
more leadership skill helps you. I take myself an example. I spent 15 years with one organization, which was called Colgate Palmolive, and about every 2, maybe 3 years, I would be promoted into a different position.
Hmm.
And those promotions came across from technology, to factory in automation, to IT in business, to accounting, to sales, to marketing, to
Right.
general
Sure.
management.
Yeah.
And each one of those positions was not because I was an expert at something. In fact, I was a novice at something. When I got my first accounting job, when I got my first sales job, when I got my first marketing job, I was not an expert marketer or an expert sales guy or an expert accountant. I knew I had a strong background, but what people recognized in me was really my leadership skills, and that helped me make all those jumps in those different work quote unquote work categories. Because how you go up in a food chain, the less that's important, because you can get a bunch of good accountants to work for you.
Yeah.
But if you can't lead them, it doesn't work.
Well, and there's a ton there that you said. So thanks for sharing that. I mean, if you're listening and you're thinking that if I get more product knowledge or I get more knowledge, if you're going to get knowledge, I think, to Tom's point, invest in your leadership skills. That seems to be kind of a universal success, I guess I want to call it, because, I run into sales professionals all the time, Tom, and they think that, hey, my goal is to be in sales management, right? I'm in sales today. I want to be a sales manager tomorrow. And I don't know how many people I've said to, just because you're good in sales doesn't mean you're going to be a good sales manager. I mean, the two have two totally different, traits. Their disc assessments can be two totally different profiles that we're looking for. So, I appreciate that. That must have been at Colgate for you. They identified, like you said, some qualities. Are there certain qualities that you feel that somebody listening should make sure that they're like really honing in on from a leadership perspective? Are there any that rise to the top in your mind?
Sure, I'll share a few with you, but let me just comment on your last thing, which you said. People who are good salespeople want to become sales managers.
Right.
I also want to make the distinction between managers and leaders.
Sure.
That is also a very large distinction, because by definition, a manager assumes that there is a well-oiled process that they're managing, right? So they come into an environment and they are managing something that's been already fine-tuned, it works well, and they just have to keep it going.
Sure.
As opposed to leadership, where you walk into a situation and say, okay, well, wait a minute, it's not well-oiled, it's
Mhm.
not working too well. So what's not working? What do we have to change? What do we keep? Are we going in the right direction? So these are all questions that a leader has to ask.
Sure.
Do I have the right team?
Yeah.
Do I understand why? So when and I wrote some notes down here, so because you had some questions on qualities of leaders, right?
Yeah.
So again, leading versus managing versus doing,
Hmm.
right? So a leader is not doing stuff. A leader is really really empowering their organization to do stuff, and they're not managing existing things, they're creating new things.
Okay.
Be authentic and with a strong character, so people buy into you.
Sure.
If you're a leader and people don't believe in you, you don't have a chance. They're
Right.
not going to follow you.
Yeah.
And and connecting people and creating an environment for a cause, right? So finding the why for those people is extremely important for leaders. This is a story I shared a couple of times. You may get a kick out of it, but parenting taught me a lot more about leadership than any conference room would. And my wife was always the disciplinary, and I was the softy. But every once in a while, my kids would get me ticked off, and I said, "Okay, your punishment is a timeout. Stand against the wall with your toes and your nose touching." Right. So that was the thing for timeout. Obviously, when my kids were like 2, 3, 4 years old, and
Sure. Doesn't work
so
when they're 20, right?
No.
Yeah,
So their nose is too long.
yeah, exactly. Yep.
So it worked with the first two daughters, and then it came to my youngest one, and I forget what happened, but something happened, and I made a stand against the wall, and she just rebelled. She said, "No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
What are you, crazy?" And then I kind of walked over and gently took my hand and pressed her back against the wall that she has to stand there, and she's now physically rebelling.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm crazy. So after about 3 minutes, I said, this is ridiculous. I just started laughing, and Kathy started laughing. We gave up, and it was a lesson to me in the sense that, first, she didn't buy into the idea. She thought it was a stupid idea. So she said, I'm not doing this. This is like totally moronic. And then my other two daughters, and I don't know which one said it, they looked at each other and they said, how stupid are we? Why do we do this? I mean, this is, and if you look at a work environment, that's pretty much how it works. You have an idea and you're in a position of authority. So you ask people to do something, and some people may do it just because you're the boss. So they say, okay, well, the boss is telling me I have to do it. And then some people are maybe a little bit more independent. They say, that's stupid. I'm just not going to do that.
Sure.
And then everybody kind of looks around and say, okay, well, what's happening? And oh, okay, well, if they don't have to do it, why do we have to do it?
Right.
So it was one of those live lessons for me to say, okay, well, unless people buy into you and your ideas, it ain't gonna work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that isn't John Maxwell have different levels of leadership where you start I mean, I envision like my first job, I made pizzas at Shakey's Pizza in Milwaukee, and it's 15 years old. And when the boss said something, you did it, you did it because he was the boss. There wasn't this respect because you were scared to death of him. Maybe it was a healthy respect, maybe it was unhealthy, but for all intents and purposes, I didn't follow him because I wanted to. I followed him because I had to. He told me what to do, and if I wanted to work there, that's what I did. Well, and it starts to, move up as you go, and I think that's, when I see people that say they want to be a leader, I'm like, why do you want to be a leader? What is it that's drawing you to that? So, are there certain characteristics that you think leaders need to have in order to be successful when it comes to, looking ahead for them, thinking, if I have these things, I'll be successful? Have there any of those risen to the top for you?
Well, let me answer the question this way. This is something that I teach salespeople all the time.
Okay.
And it just doesn't have to be for salespeople, but it has to be really any communication that happens between two people. There are three questions that John says get asked, and I agree 100%. In fact, maybe before I even got on the show, you asked yourself those three questions, so you may be asking yourself those same questions, right? So the first question is, does Tom care for me? Right. And that really, when I teach salespeople, that really happens because you're listening to their problems. So when you go into a meeting with a customer, the first thing you do is kind of focus on that question. Do I really care for this individual? I'm listening to the individual. I'm asking open-ended questions to try to get to the root cause.
Sure.
Because maybe the root cause is not the problem itself. Maybe the root cause is underlying that problem. And then, once you have a good idea of what that problem is, because you show them that you care for them, the second question that they'll ask you is, can Tom help me? Right. So does Tom care for me, and can Tom help me? So as an individual working in an organization, you look at your boss and you say, okay, well, does my boss really care that my screaming baby was up, till 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's why I look tired this morning?
Sure.
Does my boss really care that my mother is sick in a hospital and I have to leave at 3 in the afternoon to visit her?
Sure.
Does my boss even know that I have a sick mother?
Right.
Right. So does my boss care for me? And then second, can my boss help me? Because look, in any organization, as an employee, you will have some challenges, and you may not be able to solve those challenges yourself.
Mhm.
right? So can you go to your boss and say, hey, boss, can you help me with this? Maybe I don't understand. Maybe I need resources. Hey, can you help
Sure.
me get resources, right? And then the third question that every individual asks themselves is, can I trust Tom? All right. So in this dialogue that you and I are having, you may be asking yourself, hey, does Tom care for me? Does he really care about my audience? Does he
Sure.
really want to add value to my audience, or does he just want to sell a bunch of books, right?
Sure.
Can Tom help me? So all this gibberish that Tom is talking, is it actually going to help me? Is it actually going to help your audience?
Sure.
And the third is, can I trust what Tom is telling me? Is it actually going to work, or is it a
Right.
bunch of gibberish?
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. And I think that, you know, you bring up a ton of great points. If you're a leader and you're listening and you're not really intimately involved, with your team, and you don't know, people, it's crazy when you think about certain companies and having all these employees, and you think you try and justify, right, that there's way too many people for me to know. And I'll never forget, I was in a company up in the middle of the state, and there was an owner there, and he had 800 people on his team, and they processed chicken. That's what they did. And this guy, the owner, was walking me through their facility, and he stopped so many people, Tom. He's like, hey, Julie, how did Johnny do last night in soccer? It was just like crazy to me how he knew all of these people. And you start to wonder, how could a company in the middle of the woods, in the middle of Wisconsin, attract people for 3 shifts to process chicken? And you start to realize that it's that culture, it's that whole entire company culture that they had, that this owner really cared. He did care, he could help, and you could trust him. And when you have those three, like you said, together, a lot of powerful things can happen. So, is caring, helping, and trusting kind of what you encourage all your leaders to, lead with in their leadership?
It's one of the things, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've seen it, I've witnessed it in my, 30, 40 years. Successful leaders. I mean, my first job was on a factory floor when I graduated from college as a shift supervisor on a production line or production center. And the plant manager, Mr. Patterson, would come down and literally, like, he was a big, strong guy. He was just literally punch guys in the arm, kidding around. And, everybody could tell that they liked him,
Yeah.
right? They kind of gravitated to him.
Sure.
Uh, and then, my first boss that I really respected, after I was in the workforce about 4 or 5 years, he was the same kind of guy. I made the mistake early on in my career where I had different silos. I had a silo for my personal life and a silo for my professional life. So at work, I was always very professional. And I wouldn't say dull and boring, but I was always, very professional edge. And in my private life, I was, a wild. I don't know what the cinema, but I was just a wild and crazy guy, right?
Wild is good enough, buddy. That's awesome.
And then I separated the two, right?
Yeah.
It was very separate silos. And then I read Jack Welch's book, and the light kind of went on me where he was actually talking about having really close relationships with his team, of making sure the spouses were together, because the spouses only see you working and you're getting home at 8 o'clock at night, and they're like, oh, what the hell,
Sure.
and then the other wives get together, and when I was living overseas, my wife and the ladies who were, old expat wives, they used to call themselves the Corporate Widows Club. That was their club, the Corporate Widows Club, because
Sure.
the guys were always working. They were traveling, they were working. So by really forming personal relationships with your team
Yeah.
is really key to telling them that you care about them and getting them, to trust you. And I didn't get that early in my career. I was just like, okay, I'm working and I'm doing a great job, but I don't need, that many friends. I mean,
Sure.
and that was just a wrong analogy.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a great point about, the silos. And I think we probably are taught that in some unwritten form, that, keep your personal life and your business life separate. Don't let people know what's going on. I remember when my parents were working, and, when I was a kid, and I could hear or remember some of the things my dad would say. There'd be like a boss in the corner office, and he'd be barking out orders to everybody. And, there wasn't any servant leadership going on. It was, leaders from the top. He's at the top and he's telling all these other people what to do. And he really didn't care. He wasn't interested in helping. And, as a result, there was a lot of mistrust because nobody could really know if they had a job the next day or not. So, I think that if you're listening, and care and help and trust are new in the sense of you haven't thought of those three together the way that Tom shared them, I think that's a great homework assignment. It's a great spot for you to check in to see, how am I doing in that? And I think I'll make myself vulnerable. When I had 22 people on the team that I ran for a company that I owned in the past, I would have my group meeting and I'd be like, all right, what's going on, guys? What's not working? And it would be like crickets, no one would say anything. So I was at least smart enough to see, well, this isn't working. So I brought in a consultant, and then I sat with the consultant in the room. So it was me, the 22 people, and the consultant. And then I said, okay, well, tell the guy what's not working. And it was still crickets. So then fortunately the consultant was smart enough. He said, Dave, why don't you go grab something for me, right? Just get the heck out of here, right? So I tell you what, Tom, the door wasn't even closed and they were just going. And again, it wasn't end of the world stuff, but it was stuff that they had on their heart and on their mind that, they were questioning, did I care? They were questioning, could I help them? And could they trust me? So I learned the hard way that you do need those in your career and in your team to be successful. So again, if you're listening and you think you're okay, I'm going to challenge you to ask your team, because you may have a blind spot. You may think that you're okay. And I know I run into a lot of people with blind spots. And I'm curious, Tom, if you run into the same, where people think they're okay and they're really not. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
No, getting a third party involved is always helpful, because it's a neutral, for whatever reason in your case, over a period of time, and I'm sure it didn't happen like that day one, but over a period of time, something happened between the relationship between you and that team,
right?
That maybe they were intimidated by you or whatever, but something happened where they didn't feel free to open up and share their concerns with you. So
right.
Getting a third party mediator, I mean, look, if a marriage is not working, what do two people do? They go to a marriage counselor, right? And the marriage counselor is just a mediator that kind of says, okay, I'm not biased. I'm not a biased individual. I don't have skin in the game for either side. So I'm just here to listen and help resolve something.
Right.
So getting a third party involved is very healthy. Consultants, I like some consultants. Other consultants I'm not that crazy about, because some consultants come in and say, okay, well, here's what you got to do. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
See ya. Let me pay my bill. And then if the 1, 2, 3 doesn't work, well, you didn't do it right, or, something else. So
yeah,
they don't get to live the pain that an organization has to live, because look, if you make changes and you have issues and you want to turn them around, it is painful, right? Because it's hard work. It's not going to happen magically. So, but getting a third party in is absolutely vital. And, very similar to that chicken story, you shared. When I remember my first job was a shift supervisor, and what we did was we had 2 day shifts, 1 4 to 12 shift and 1 midnight shift every month. So we kind of rotated, because it was a 24 5, not 24/7, but 24/5, maybe 24/6.
Sure.
Production facility. So one day the word comes down that Ruben Mark, who was the CEO, and by the way, this guy was a brilliant CEO. He was either CEO or chairman of Colgate-Palmolive for about 12 years.
Mm.
And for more than 12 years, the company never missed a quarter. So
Right.
Wall Street loved this guy, and
Sure.
he was a brilliant guy. But word has that he's coming down the next morning to do an inspection or walkthrough on the facility. So that midnight shift when I was working, we didn't produce one item. Everybody was cleaning up, tuning the machine. So the moment Ruben walks through that production floor,
Yeah.
everything looks perfect, right?
Sure. Yep.
So sure enough, I stuck around the morning shift because I wanted to see, Ruben, and he walks through, and then it reminded me of a kid's, when you have kids like 4 or 5 in a soccer game, nobody mans their spot. Everybody just kind of gathered around the soccer ball. Wherever the soccer ball goes, this little beehive of kids go. And that's what it reminded me, because, here's Ruben Mark, and there's a bunch of suits, with him. And, if Ruben stopped short, one of the guys' heads would go right up his butt. I mean, they were,
Sure.
and then they stopped by one of the machines. They never even, saw anybody or talked to anybody. And somebody pointed at something, and they must have been there for about 30 seconds. Then I walked on and went to the next point. I was like, what a freaking waste of time and effort.
Yeah.
Where, we took, 8 hours of resources for what? Right.
Sure.
So then when I became CEO, and I had production facilities, I had 12 production facilities all over the world. And whenever, I went to a country, because I would always fly in once a month for a business review or once a quarter for a business review.
Sure.
In the ones, the businesses that had a little bit more issues, I would come more often. The businesses that are doing it well, I would want to come once a quarter. But, even in Brazil, I'm in Minas Gerais, and, there's a production there, and, we do the business review once a quarter, and I would go down to the production floor and say, people knew about my first name. I couldn't talk Portuguese, but I would, again, talk through an interpreter. And one of the assignments was that I would always ask him. I said, how can we help you better? How can we make this facility a better place for you to work? How can we produce more? How can we produce at a less cost?
Sure.
I would always get there, because I remembered Ruben Mark, walking through, not giving a crap about, anybody on the production floor. And I said, it wasn't right.
Yeah.
So, and I knew that my guys on that production floor had a lot to contribute. I had some great ideas that were implemented that actually worked. Little ideas at the time, but they solved problems. So I always asked these guys when I was in Brazil, and said, okay, well, what do you think? And then, we would go back and we'd talk about those. And it was the local management's responsibility to tell that person that gave us that idea, say, hey, great idea. We're going to implement it. Or great idea. I don't think it's for us right now, but thank you for the idea anyway. So this way it was a closed loop, and people that were on that floor really, they felt valued.
Yeah.
Because their voices were heard.
Yeah. If you work all day, for 50 weeks a year, and you don't feel like your voice is heard, and you don't feel like you're valued, that's got to be so incredibly painful of an existence. Those are the people that just loathe going to work. They try every means possible. They burn up every sick day that they possibly can. They burn up every ounce of vacation that they possibly can. If there's an inch of snow for us in the Midwest, they're thinking, oh, maybe I can stay home today. That's got to be such a brutal existence. And I don't remember it probably since maybe I was, in a teenager, where I really hated what I did, but there are, so many people that hate what they're doing. And I feel sorry for them. And if you're listening and that's you, that's why we put on this show every week, is for you to realize that there's opportunities out there to not have to go through that. I mean, if somebody comes to you, Tom, and says, I just hate my job, what would your suggestion be to them, if they're listening?
First of all, if you hate your job, don't do it. I mean, most of us spend 8 to 10 hours a day working. Yeah. So if you hate 8 to 10 hours a day, that's 1/3 of your life doing what you're doing. Don't do it. But then the question is, okay, how do I find out what I should do? It took me a while to figure this out. And this is another thing that I love sharing with audiences. There's 3 questions. So draw 3 circles. and put in a question in each one of those circles, and have those three circles intersect in one spot.
Okay. Got it? Oh, you there?
And the third question that goes into the third circle
Oh,
is, what am
I
I
missed-
good at?
You went rogue on me there. So I missed the first two. So you want to, Rain will fix that. No big deal. But you want to, let's go back to what the three questions were. So can you let me know what the three questions are?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question is, who am I? The second question that goes into the second circle is, what am I passionate about? And the third question that goes into the third circle is, what am I good at? So who am I? What am I passionate about? And what am I good at? And where those three circles intersect, that's where you should be living your life, right? So the questions for me, if I look at my own character,
Yeah.
is who am I? I'm a servant leader.
Okay.
What am I passionate about? I'm passionate about adding value to people, adding value to companies. So what does that, adding value is kind of a generic terms. What does that specifically mean?
Sure.
Well, it means making people better, adding value to people, making their lives better, making companies better, making organizations better. Right. So adding value to them. The third question is, what am I good at? I'm pretty good at mentoring, and I'm pretty good at leading. I've been doing it all my life.
Sure.
So the beauty of that is, if I live my life with those three circles, I don't have to live in those silos that I mentioned to you before, because I can be a servant leader at work, and I could be a servant leader at church. I could be a servant leader of my family. I can add value to my customers. I can add value to my employees. I can add value to the products that my consumers use. I can mentor my kids. I can mentor my employees. I could be a mentor to my friends, which, I have a bunch of funny stories about. So I don't have to reinvent my life and have a different type of lifestyle or actions or activities, whether I'm at work, whether I'm at school, whether I'm
Sure.
at play, or whether I'm at home. People can recognize me through my actions, regardless of which particular circumstance I'm in. And then once somebody told me that, look, if you can get somebody to really be interested in the product of those three questions, then you'll be also a rich person, because then you have a nice market for that particular
Sure.
product.
Well, and I think so. The three questions are, who am I? What am I passionate about? And what am I good at? So I get number two and number three. I get how to kind of sit with what am I passionate about. I get how to, look at what am I good at. I think that myself, along with some of the listeners, might struggle with, who am I? How do I answer that question? Do you have any, feedback for people or insight on that? Because you answered it probably because you sat with it for a long time and it just rolled right off your tongue that you're a servant leader. But I'm trying to think about somebody that's really never had to consider these three questions before, and the first question kind of hits them square in the face. And once they don't know how to answer it, they tend to just stop the whole process, So how could you, what tips do you have for somebody that's struggling with answering that who am I question?
Well, who you are is essence of your main body of your character,
Okay.
right? And what is the person's character? Well, like, person's character really starts with their value set. And by the way, as a side note, a person's character is equivalent to an organizational culture, right? An organizational culture is the same as an individual's character. In fact, many startups, whoever started their companies up, whatever their character was, that's probably the de facto organizational culture until they start thinking about it. So, if you look at my character, I mean, why am I a servant leader? Well, one of my values is love, right? Unconditional love. And another value is honesty, and another value is integrity. I do as I say. I don't, say as I do as I say.
Okay.
Honesty. Where did honesty come from? When I was 7, my grandfather slapped me across the face so hard because I lied to my grandmother. Right. So, at the age of 7, I learned it's probably not a good thing to lie.
Yeah. Ouch.
So values are the building blocks for your character, and the character is going to define you. And by the way, as a side note, just pay attention to your character, because there's also a word out there in the world is called reputation.
Mhm.
So in good leaders cases, so if you're a good, strong leader, people will look at you and they say, okay, his character is his reputation. They line up, right? If you're not a strong leader, your character and your reputation probably doesn't line up, right?
Okay.
Because when especially, and this because of the disc. I mean, disc shows you 3 graphs, and one of the graphs is, how do you behave under stress? And when you are under stress, because whether it's a situation, work, whatever, your true self comes out.
Right.
And if your true self, that's what people see from the outside, and that's what is called your reputation.
Hmm.
So you may think you're an honest person, but when you're stressed and you start lying, people say, well, his character, which is comprised of honesty, as this individual says, and what he does when he's stressed is actually, bullshit or lie or whatever. So that kind of doesn't line up. So, and I do this with companies, with organizations on culture. One of the things we do is we go into a room with maybe, let's say there's 10 people on a team. Each person gets a piece of paper. That piece of paper probably has, 50, 55 values on it.
Mhm.
And they start, circle your top 6. Right. And then you kind of compare notes from the 10 to 12 people. And usually there's probably 1, 2, maybe even 3 that they all agree on.
Sure.
Right. So those are common values that an organization shares. And then through a series of exercises, then you agree on, 5 or 6 different values. Those are called shared values. And you're not gonna, don't come up with a list of 10 or 12, because that's too many. 5 or 6 is a pretty good number. Those are shared values that they have. And then you look at those shared values and say, okay, well, what does it mean? Why do we share those values? And that helps you develop what you call the organizational culture. And again, it's a very simple statement. And the great thing about organizational culture, or about a person's character, is you can call them out on that, because they publicly stated, this is my character.
Sure. Yep.
And in organizational culture, people agreed, maybe they did a lot of work up front to see what that culture would be and what those shared values are. So 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, anyone in the organization should be able to honestly sit across the table with another person in the organization and say, look, what you just did does not hold true to our shared values. And it's not okay.
Sure.
And it's, the reason it's nice is because I'm not attacking you as an individual. All I'm saying is, look, we believed, we talked a lot about it. Everybody's on board. We believe this is a shared values, and is the culture of this organization. And what you did just doesn't line up with that. So it's not an attack on an individual that, you're stupid, or, you did something wrong. It's just like, we're just not aligned according to what we believed.
Sure. Wow. That's really good. So if you're listening and you are wondering who you are for this particular exercise, think of what's your character, think of your values, what your culture is, and what your reputation is. And I think if you struggle with that, it would be good to ask people around you, what character traits do you see me, exhibit on a regular basis? Because, it might be hard. Self-awareness is not something that's automatic. There's a lot of people that struggle understanding themselves. And so if that's you, rather than give up on the exercise, I would encourage you to ask somebody around you, to help you with that. But, think about that. Who am I? What am I passionate about? And what am I good at? If you can have those 3 overlap, to Tom's point, finding that sweet spot will really help you vastly improve, to the people that don't like their job to get a job that will at least scratch the itch for those three pieces. So that's a great analogy. I appreciate that you sharing that. So as we
And
go
just to illustrate that point, I wanted to use my youngest daughter because, my wife and myself, my wife was more, like I said, more disciplinary. So my youngest daughter, Alex, was not a high achiever like my middle daughter. My middle daughter was rising the corporate ladder, doing, being very successful, and my youngest daughter was kind of trying to find herself. And my wife was like, okay, well, think about your actions because you got to pay the rent and you got to do this and you got to do that, be responsible.
sure.
And I always said, look, follow your passion. So turns out her passion was climbing mountains. So she climbed the 6 or 7 highest peaks in the Western United States, including Whitney, Rainier, and all those mountains. And
Nice.
she's a trail runner. So she's all outdoors. And my wife was like, oh, yeah, well, how does that pay the bills? So before you know it, she's got, and her other passion is photography. She's a very creative individual. So
Great.
in all these climbs, in all these trails, she's always taking pictures
Yeah.
and short videos. And they actually her and her friend made a short documentary. So now
Nice.
she's got like 15,000, 20,000 followers on Instagram.
Oh,
So then, she's out in Salt Lake, and this company, Kodiak Cakes, calls her because now she's beginning to know in the industry about her passion of mountain climbing and the
sure.
pictures and the videography, and they needed somebody to manage their social media,
Nice.
right? And so all of a sudden she's got this great job. It's her dream job because it took a while, but she followed a passion,
Sure.
and she's really good at photography, and she's got this creative eye. So she's doing what she loves, and
Excellent.
she's really good at it. So that's an example. And it took a while. I mean,
Sure.
for 3 or 4 or 5 years, my wife was after her. How are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to pay your bills? And I just said, follow your passion,
Sure.
and eventually it'll work out.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thanks, Alex, for being, a guinea pig, test dummy, whatever you want for this, because we love to learn from actual examples. And so, stay with your passion. How cool is that? So many people find a passion, but they don't stick with it. So I think that's a really, really smart, piece of advice. If you're listening and you know what your passion is, hopefully it aligns with what you're good at, and then hopefully it aligns with who you are, because then I think you're going to find that sweet spot. So that's so cool. So real quick, as we start to come in for a landing on this today, Tom, your book C-Suite Beyond talks about 4 keys to the leadership success. Just give us a high level on what those 4 are, so that we could get a bunch of people to purchase your book.
Absolutely. The 4 keys, even before the 4 keys, just remember, a key word is called influence. So the 4 keys will help you influence situations. The 4 keys will help you influence others. We're all influencing. If you're a salesperson sitting across the street, across the table from a purchasing person,
Sure.
the salesperson is trying to influence the purchasing person to buy their product, and the purchasing person is trying to influence the salesperson to give them a better price or better conditions or whatever. So, life is just nothing, we're trying to always influence each other. And the way you can influence others is, first of all, again, we talked about a character or corporate culture, right? If you have a corporate culture, if you have a strong character, you will be able to lead people and lead organizations much better. Second is you got to have a vision. I showed you, and I shared with you who I am. My vision is also, I'm a man of God, a leader of men. So what a vision does, and I hear people talking about vision statements, is it's a goal. Well, a vision statement is not a goal. A vision statement is a roadmap for a long-term future. If you look at these great companies, whether it's Coca-Cola, you looked at their annual report 50, 60, 70 years ago, it said, we refresh the world. It says that today, we refresh the world. Nike, we unleash human potential. These are unleash human potential is not a goal that you're going to achieve in a year or 2 years or 5 years.
Sure.
It's your why. It's your why. Why are we making athletic equipment?
Right.
Because we want to unleash people's, potential.
Mm-hmm.
So a vision is a long-term goal, and it helps your roadmap because it helps you answer those major questions in life. So anything that comes across me, if I'm going to open that door and go through that, the answer has to be that it honors God and it's a leadership role. If the answers to those questions is not yes, then I don't do it.
Sure.
Right? If Coca-Cola, somebody does, hey, let's launch this product, the first question they'll ask is it refreshing?
Yeah.
If it's not refreshing, then probably Coca-Cola doesn't do it.
Right.
So that's the second. The third one is have a strategy, but a growth strategy. A healthy strategy is a growth strategy, and what that strategy has to be with has to align with your vision. So don't get distracted by the shiny object.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that your strategy supports the vision that you agreed on. Otherwise, it takes you down a different path.
Sure.
And it can actually destroy you.
Sure.
I don't care if you're a $5 billion organization or a $500 million organization, or $5 million organization. Your strategy really consists of asking two questions always. How am I spending my money? And how am I spending my time? And my time is, okay, what are my employees doing? That's my time. And how am I spending my money is what, outside the organization, how am I spending my money?
Sure.
And that always is those two questions. And then the fourth one is putting a diverse team together. And I use diverse, especially you appreciate this because of DISC and you understand what a diverse thinking team is.
Right.
And that's really what don't surround yourself with likes, because that's our tendency. Surround yourselves with people that can help you with your blind spots. And part of that is, if you're from Brazil, you're going to look at the world and think a little bit differently than if you're from Germany.
Sure.
So part of that is also geography and, ethnicity. It all comes into it, but it really boils down to diversity of thinking. All right. And the fifth one is I call it a bonus key, because it's not the four keys, but the fifth one is the bonus key, is how to connect with people. And there's a world of difference between talking with people, communicating with people, and connecting with people.
Sure.
And until you figure out how to connect with individuals, the first two, are helpful, but you really understand how to connect with. So those are the 4 or 5 keys. If your listeners would like, there's you don't have to buy the book if you don't like that. I'd love to, buy a book and share, learn from my experiences. But there's a complimentary ebook that's kind of an executive summary of the full book, and you can download that free of charge anytime. So.
Oh, wow. Excellent. We'll put that link in the show notes. For those listening, what's the link that they should go to, Tom?
If you could just, it goes to it's leadershipdisciples.com/free book, but or they can go just to my website and go to the connect section and request a free book. So
awesome. Perfect. Well, there's so much here. So we covered a ton of ground in a short amount of time. So thank you for that. Again, if you're listening and you didn't get value in this, then I got to say that's on you, because, Tom shared a ton of stuff. I mean, whether it's culture, vision, growth in people, whether it's, the 3 things that we talked about, with who you are, what's your passion, what are you good at? I mean, that right there, that's gold. I know that there's plenty of people listening that can use that. So again, find something from today that you can actually turn into something positive, so that you can look back and say, man, Tom really added value into my life, because that's why he's here. That's why we do this each week, is to be able to add value in your life. So if people want to get in contact with you, Tom, what's the best way for people to reach out and connect with you?
I am blessed and cursed with a last name, like you couldn't pronounce it because it was tough.
Yeah.
But if you Google Kereszti, Kerestzti, you'll find me, my sister, and my daughters. It's a pretty unique last name. So if you Google Tom Kereszti, probably Leadership Disciples, pops up. Just go to that website, and there's a contact form. Just fill it in, and let me know why you want me to talk to you, or what you want to talk to me about. And I have pretty much a own policy. So if you send me a note, I'm happy to answer. You can also go to LinkedIn. Same thing, very unique name. You can find me on LinkedIn. So Instagram, I don't know, you'll find me somehow.
Yeah, great. There weren't a lot of that last name on LinkedIn when I looked at it. So yeah, you're right there. You're safe. But oh my gosh, sorry that I Kereszti. I just got to say.
Perfect.
There
Wow.
you go. See, now at the end.
Excellent.
Excellent. Now we got her at the end. Now the pressure was off. So hopefully, again, you heard something today that will unlock some potential, that will just, jar you to the point where you jump on his website, call him, buy a book, get a free ebook, do something with the time that you invested, because there's just some great stuff here. So I thank you, Tom, so much for hanging out with us. And oddly enough, I'm in San Diego right now. You're in San Diego. So we should have, like we said before, we should have just did this in a coffee shop, but people would have thought it was weird with microphones and everything. So I think this works out good. So again, thank you so much. There was so much more to cover. Got to get you back and learn more about your story. And I really enjoyed it. Took a bunch of notes like I always do. So thank you for investing in myself and also in our listeners, and got to get you back again soon.
All right. God bless. Thanks so much.
Thank you.